Hello friends, this is Jennifer Pearson, Thistle Gypsy, here for another dark deck interview, this time using Ghosts and Spirits Tarot by Lisa Hunt. So, just trying to remember if this is, I think this is the first Halloween themed deck I ever got. And we'll see if I should have just stopped right there and not have gotten anything else. One of the reasons I did get something else is because these cards are so tied to stories that it's not an easy reader. It's more of a one card pull kind of a deck for me. And I even have this little white book here with me right now so that I can take a look at the tales that go with each card to see if that illuminates the meaning of the card. But let's take a look. So I'm not going to go through my spiel because this is like the 9th. What is this? No, this is the 11th dark deck interviews that I've done. So you can go back to the first one to kind of understand better why I'm doing this, but I'm just going to jump into the spread. Question number 1, how are you a dark deck? It's the zombies. Zombies. So it could just mean that it's dealing with the, with the dead, although this is ghosts and spirits. And there are spirits and there are benevolent spirits in here. So maybe it's saying, now zombies are supposed to feed on human flesh, right? They're supposed to interfere with our everyday lives and getting on with things. So they're the dead that interfere with our functioning in everyday life. They're a threat. They're the dead that are a threat. And so that is kind of, the intent of my doing these, asking these questions, is finding out things in my life that I'm not paying close enough attention to, that are interfering with my progress in life. So, number 2, what dis-ease can you help me with? And these are the Menehune. These are benevolent spirits, I believe, so I need to look at page 56 in the guidebook. And that is, whoops. They would be similar to the 9 of Pentacles, although she really doesn't follow any system here. She made her own assignments for her own reasons. These are Hawaiian, and they're described as fae who live in forests and caves. Good swimmers, high divers, like most fairies, they played pranks on people, mainly nocturnal. So mischievous, but also helpful. So she sees them as living in, a place of a lot of richness, because you've got all of the minerals down there, and it's also very protected. So what dis-ease can you help me with? So that doesn't, see, this might not be that dark of a deck, because I'm not connecting with that particularly as a form of dis-ease. If we're talking about my home, you know, I do have some moisture issues in my crawl space. So this might be a more practical deck in terms of mischievous but helpful. I can't say my dogs are helpful, but I could put my dogs in that category, but again, that would be practical. So let's move on. Number 3, what is your recommendation for that disease? And here we have the mummy Ka. So maybe binding those mischievous, putting my mischievous animals in straitjackets. I think this deck has a sense of humor. Hiring some mummies to soak up the moisture in my crawl space. Let me look and see what it says about the mummy Ka, because it's not just any mummy, it's a specific mummy. I think it said it was on page 9. So this was the strength card in this deck. All right, ancient Egyptians believed that each person is born with a spirit double that lived detached. A spiritual double that lived detached from the body and served as the life force. The deceased would join Ka for eternity. Ka would wander at night in search of a place to live and food to eat in the afterlife. So I guess Ka are these spiritual doubles. If Ka were neglected, so if your spiritual double is neglected, it would return to haunt the living. Therefore, Egyptians preserved the body through mummification and left offerings of food for sustenance. So this ends up being like a really spiritual, almost hearkening back to the Tarot of Transformation and the Osho Zen Tarot. Kind of a message is coming to me in terms of taking care of, like here it's like making offerings. It's like knowing where your richness lies in terms, you know, where your spiritual home is, kind of here, your spiritual home, your spiritual security, and making offerings. So making offerings to the fairies so they don't turn against you. So anyway, clearly to me, not being the most, not being as quite dark deckish. Halloween, I think this is a great Halloween deck. To sit with some people and each person pull a card or two and, you know, kind of do a mental exercise and see if it works. But let's check out the others. Number 4. What dark aspect of my personality holds me back the most in my relationships? So a part of my personality that holds me back in relationships. Oh, too funny. This is the Banshee. Or no, it's the Banshee. I think this is the Queen of Swords. Too critical? Certainly, could be. So I could say it nailed that one. No pun intended with the swords there. Let me see, where are the swords? Yes, she is the Queen of Swords, which I do identify in general with the Queen of Swords. It says, Banshee is a spirit of Celtic lore whose cries foreshadow death. She often warns family members of the sadness ahead with her penetrating wails. She would appear as either a beautiful maiden or an ugly old hag. The banshee is one with the elements, and like the thunder that warns of inclement weather ahead, the banshee's cry is a harbinger of changes to come. She is the messenger of truth and helps others prepare for the inevitable. Well, I'm going to stick with the critical aspect. If anything, I probably don't speak up enough, and maybe it's a matter of the balance between, they say there has to be a balance in a relationship between positive, uplifting, reinforcing kinds of communications versus critical types of communications. So maybe it's calling me out on that as a flaw. And I think that's valid. And just the Queen of Cups being too analytical, too much in my head. So this one is, what dark aspect of my personality holds me back the most in my career? And I got poltergeist. And if I recall correctly, this is kind of with that kid there in the middle of a sorcerer's apprentice kind of a card that is indicating, getting involved in something you don't know how to handle or something like that. Not something I'm that inclined to, but I will say that I do sometimes stir things up. 30. And sometimes that results in my ending up taking on more work. So what is... Oh, it's the Ace of Swords. And there's a sword right here. The Ace of Swords, a noisy ghost, causes disturbances by flinging and displacing objects. So it is appropriate. I don't fling or displace objects, but when it's almost like the same problem as this. If I see something that doesn't make sense, or that I feel like it needs to be done a different way or should be done a different way, I start rearranging it and saying, well, why don't we do it this way? Why don't we do it that way? I don't know that it holds me back in my career. Well, it holds me back in this way. It doesn't hold me back in the sense of other people judging me for having done it. Many times there's gratitude for righting a situation or creating a process that runs more smoothly. But it does slow down my processes. So when I stop to examine something, to start doing it in a different way, to start improving on how it could be done, that slows down all of my own processes, and it holds me back from getting done other things I need to do. So I see the truth of it in that way. I'm trying to see if there's anything else here. But I think that's it. So I would say that this deck did very well with these two. And this, so yeah, not bad. But again, because I do have to, I don't know the tales very well. I'm not steeped in ghosts and spirits. Um, this is not a deck. I would maybe, because I'm so reliant on the guidebook, I would rate this deck as a 5 to a 6. I would rate it higher than, say, my Rider-Waite-Smith deck. But it's still, and it might even, yeah, I don't know if it's under my Tarot of Transformation. The Tarot of Transformation is more psychological, so that's why I think it would make it higher than this. It's kind of sitting, that 5 to 6 is kind of sitting with my Ghost Tarot. And the main reason I really wouldn't use that for a single question, yes. Although it does have a penchant for giving some more practical answers rather than psychological answers, the Ghosts and Spirits Tarot does. One time I did a question for my mother about what is haunting their house or something like that, and the card I got was very clearly referring to they'd had a dishwasher problem and it ended up flooding their house. So it was actually a material it wasn't a spirit, it was a material thing that went wrong in their home. But yeah, no chance I'm getting rid of that. I do love all the tales and that are told in the guidebook, and you know, so that deck's sticking around, but it's not a go-to deck for me, really for anything. But I just like it. But I figured it was worth testing it, just to see how it would do with the questions, and it did provide some relevant answers with the career and the relationship reading. So I won't, you know, it did okay. It did okay, but it's not going to be a go-to deck for me. I would still go to the Osho Zen first. All right, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.